My name's Mark. If we haven't got the chance to meet, I met a couple of you out there with the races going on. That was fun. I'd like to do that again. But I do have something that I want to share with you tonight because we are going to finish up our series in about friendship. So to give you kind of a catch up, week 1, we talked about Finding Nemo. Who's here for that? Right? So there's this moment where he's with all his friends, and there's this like, are we going to go out into that area, or not? And Nemo's not allowed to, and so they kind of peer pressure him to, and then Dad swoops in, and then my favorite teacher of any movie, well, nothing to see here, kids, Anyway, that whole scene happens. We kind of talked about that and how sometimes that's how we do get into trouble, but also some of us, and maybe all of us, struggle with the rules that our parents put on us. And I know some of you are like, yeah. Well, I was a kid. I'm also a parent, and so I see both sides of that. And we talked about that. We talked about how important you are to your family, and how it still matters to follow those rules and all that stuff, but your friends matter. In the second week, we talked about guarding that inner circle. If you remember that chart that we put on, it's called the Dunbar number, meaning that no one can really have more than 5 very close friends within their inner circle, like the people that you share kind of your deepest parts of your life with. If you remember, you were here that night, we said, who would say they have never and will never share their deepest, darkest secrets with anyone? And we kind of had some discussion about that. And then last week, Eli did an incredible job teaching us about how to be the friend that we want, because we would all say we want friends that are honest, that are trustworthy, that are dependable, that are loyal. But some of us don't display those characteristics ourselves, and so it's important to also be that friend. Tonight's going to be difficult because we're going to talk about what happens when friendships do end and what to do after. Now, I don't want to take a survey tonight about who's recently had a friendship end, because that might need some counseling, and we'll just skip on past that. So I'll just tell you some stories about me. I have found that sometimes that friends do part ways and that friendships end, and we need to figure out if it's like a big deal or if it's just kind of like life happening. Because, let me just ask this question real quick. Who has ever moved from one area to a whole other area? I don't mean like, we lived in Sienna and then we bought another house in Sienna. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm like, you're in a new school, in a new school district, maybe in a new state. A lot of us. Okay, so who's moved one time before? Who's moved at least 2 times? Who's moved at least 3 times? Man, we're gonna keep going. Who's moved at least 4 times? Yeah. Who's moved at least 5 times? Let's just go ahead and skip. Has anyone moved 10 times? Do you have like that number in your head? Okay. You've got 8? Okay, so when I said 10 times, you kept your hand up. I was like, oh, Angel's moved more than 10 times. Okay, so I tell you what we'll do. Jonathan and Angel, if you guys want to argue about that, there's a fantastic time and place to do that, and it's literally not right now. So you say 8 and you say 9. Is that? Okay, 5. Okay, cool. So you think 5, and we'll argue about it later. I have moved 8 times in my life. Now, I'm older than y'all, but that's still, I think, probably more than the average person. Now, when I was younger, 0 to 18, it was really like my dad's job that kept moving us in different places. So we moved when I was 2. I don't remember that move because I was 2. We moved in the middle of 3rd grade, and then we moved in the middle of 7th grade. And so that was kind of, how my upbringing happened. And then I moved a couple times as an adult because of kind of some job stuff happening. Now, when you move, who's moved at least once? Raise your hand again. Did you keep up your friendships after you moved? Like yes or no? Some? So I know that we all probably have like nuanced like comments, but by and large, like, would you say yes? Who would say no? No, okay, cool. And what's interesting about that is depending on when you move, like when I was in 3rd grade, there was no keeping up with my friends in whatever 1990 91 or something. I don't know what year it was. But it was pre-cell phones, pre-social media and all that. So there wasn't like keeping up with friends. There was like, I could write a letter to this person, put a stamp on it, and then it could get there in like 2 months. And then, just joking. But that's how things would happen. And so we just kind of lost track of friendships that way. Now things are a little different. Who's moved in the last year? The last year you've moved? Yeah, Kyle, Eli, Jayton. Okay, yeah, so you may even be still kind of feeling like some of that. Like every once in a while when we talk to our kids, like we moved here 3 years ago. And when we talk to our kids, every once in a while, like some conversations about our friends in Ohio show up. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember, like we had those people. But it's been a long time, so sometimes we forget. Sometimes you change schedules. And so like the person that you were in class with last year, you're not in class with this year, and you kind of like just drift apart. There's never anything wrong. You just kind of don't talk as much anymore. Anyone kind of feel that? Like, yeah, like I have someone that I used to be friends with, but I know I just kind of don't really see him. Nothing's wrong. We just don't see each other all that often. Yeah. Anyone, so those of you who moved, I'm guessing you moved school districts too. Is that like fair to say? Like pretty, yeah, in different situations. And so you're going to be with some new people. Who has been, just curious, who has been the new kid at a school like in the middle of the year? Just in the middle of the year, like on a Wednesday you showed up. That's a special kind of crazy, isn't it? They're like living their lives, and then you show up and you take the desk and you just kind of enter into the new school year, you know, which for them started months ago, but for you started like today. And so I can tell you that when I moved in 7th grade, I moved from Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, to Indianapolis, Indiana. And that's a big shift. I can remember specifically the style of clothing in Alabama at that point was like jeans and something called Timberland boots. Do you know what Timberlands are? Some of you sneakerheads know. I mean, you're laughing like they're still, like they're fine. They're nice. Are Timberlands not nice? They are. Thank you, Jonathan. I knew I was going to get some help from Jonathan. Eli's laughing at me. We'll talk after. Jeans, Timberland boots, and flannel shirts. Don't ask me why flannel shirts in Alabama, because it was deathly hot. You guys know about deathly hot. But when I moved to Indiana, that was not the style. That was not the style. It was like Tommy Hilfiger was a real big deal when I was in 7th grade. So this would have been about 1997 or so. And Nike, and you know, it was like, what basketball jersey are you wearing? That's what was possible because Indiana is basketball country. So I show up in jeans and flannels and boots in a season where a show called Home Improvement was very popular, and there was a character on Home Improvement called Al Borland, and he wore jeans and flannels and boots, but he was a nerd. Tell you what, that didn't help me out at all. Like I was already on the negative end of like cool points, and like I walk in, and then also there was this little movie called Forrest Gump that had come out. Oh, so we've seen this movie. Okay, so around the time I was in 7th grade, and does anybody know where Forrest Gump is from? Greenbow, Alabama. And I tell you what, when someone named Forrest Gump, who's like not known for his intellectual acumen, is the most popular on the movie screens, and where are you from? I'm from Alabama. Oh, run, Forrest, run. All those jokes start to happen. I'm like, Mom, Dad, get me the heck out of here. Like, I have come in enemy territory. Like, I need some Tommy Hilfiger, and I need Forrest Gump to disappear, like, out of culture. And so if you've ever been a new kid, you know, so it's tough. It's tough. Making new friends is incredibly difficult, especially in middle school. Maybe it's more difficult in high school. I don't know. Maybe we could have an open mic night to share about that another time. But in middle school for me, it was let's hold those bottles maybe on the floor or just throw them in the trash. So anyway, it was difficult. So I moved and I changed friends. That's kind of what happens. But also, I've had some friendships change because something happened and it wasn't good. I've had friendships change because I had to break away from a group of friends who I didn't think was going the right direction. That was just me. That's just me. And I think I talked about that the first week that I had a group of friends in high school, And we all had kind of the same idea, like no alcohol, no drugs, none of this stuff that's going to get us arrested, scholarships lost or anything like that. Went to college, a Christian college actually, and I wasn't like a super Christian or anything, but I was like around some people that were pointing me in the right direction. It was super healthy. Came home and noticed that some of my old friends that I'd used to hang out with had kind of changed some of their behaviors. And so it was very, very weird for me. I felt very, very awkward. If you've ever felt that awkwardness of like, my friends that I used to be friends with are not necessarily my friends anymore. And you just, what do we do about that? I've had my trust betrayed. Like I said, we're going to talk about me tonight, not about you. I'm not trying to make it about me, but I don't necessarily want everyone to share all their deepest, darkest stuff. So I've had my trust betrayed one time. Someone that had told me, and this is Mark as an adult. Okay, Mark as an adult. So this was in the 2010 decade, 2010 to 2020. I had someone betray my trust, and it completely derailed our friendship for a while. Completely derailed our friendship because it was betrayed in a pretty big way. Something that I had shared with them was shared with other people, and it was difficult for me, Mark, to overcome. I don't know about you. Maybe you're like, no big deal. Everyone can know my stuff. For me, I was very, not just embarrassed, but I was like, I trusted you. I trusted you, and you shared that with someone else, and it hurt. And what did I feel about that? Did I just go sharing with that person again? No, sir. Like, trust is very difficult to earn. Listen to me. So some of you need to hear this. It's very difficult to earn. Trust is very difficult to earn, and you can lose it in like a second. Now, the middle schoolers who are talking in the back are probably not going to get this. Hey, Kyle, you going to focus tonight? Cool. So that stuff that's happened to me that I had to now figure out how to deal with that. Sometimes I had this one situation where people that I did qualify as friends started to make friends with some other folks that were in some dangerous places. So it's not necessarily that they were doing anything wrong, but they were starting to hanging out with people that were doing stuff wrong. So I'm like, oh man, like by the guilt of association, like I'm hanging out with some people that are doing, there's lots of ways that this gets really difficult. And if I can just be honest with you right now, over the course of my 38 years or so, I've had to make some difficult decisions with friends. And if I can just be very honest with you, you're going to have to as well. You are going to have to as well. There's going to be a million different reasons that you might have to change up some friendship situations. And some of those things are going to be because you changed schools, right? Some of you in middle school right now are going to end up in high school, and you were at different middle schools, and now you're at all one high school, and you're it's a new situation, new systems, kind of a new cultural point, and so you're going to have to kind of change some things. Different schedule, different everything. Middle school and high school, there's a big shift. High school to college, there's a big shift. Stuff happens. When you go from your senior year of high school, right? We've talked to some of you seniors about this, into college, it is like way, way different. It's way different. And you get to figure out how to make healthy friendship decisions along the way. In Acts chapter 15, there's this moment where we see some friends separate. And it's like inside the church too. So this isn't just, well, my friend at school did this and now I don't want to be friends with. This is like two believers, two Christ followers who had been through thick and thin together, that had been building the church together, had a sharp disagreement and had to separate. Now, the book of Acts, if you're new to the Bible, it's interesting that the book of Acts happens right after Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all kind of the story about Jesus. He's born, he lives these 33 years in kind of the perfect way, never sins, and then he does ministry for 3 of those years, and then at the end, he dies and he rises again 3 days later. And 4 different people talk about that specific story from 4 different viewpoints. And the book of Acts is like, what happens after that? And let me just tell you what happens after that. This is all kind of, it's in the back half of the Bible, And the book of Acts is the birth of the church. So if I can just emphasize it again, these are people doing a very important thing together, birthing the church. And in Acts chapter 15, they are having maybe one of the most important discussions in the book of Acts, because you had these Jews and you had the Gentiles, and they were two very culturally different groups of people. The Jews had been the people in the Old Testament trying to follow God through all these laws and the temple rules and the sacrifices and all this stuff. Well, the Gentiles had kind of been doing their own thing, and some of them had worshiped different idols outside of Judaism. None of them, though, were in kind of the Jewish circles. But when Jesus showed up, they're like, yeah, he's the real deal. He's the Son of God. He died. He rose again. Like, he's the one we're following. And so the Jews are like, wait. You just showed up to the party. And we've been doing all this stuff, all the sacrifices. And some of us guys here had like a little surgery that you guys didn't have. And like, this is going to have to be hammered out. We're going to have to figure out, like, are you ready to like live by our rules? And there's this whole like argument happening inside the church. And what ended up happening is this something called the Jerusalem Council. If you want to learn about it, it's right there in Acts chapter 15. The Jerusalem Council happens. And essentially what they say is, we need to make sure that we don't make it difficult for the Gentiles to come to Jesus, because the most important thing here is Jesus. And so we're not going to get in the way. And us Jews over here, we're going to have to figure out how to like live by the Jesus way and not by like the old school Judaism way, because Jesus has kind of come and he's switched some things up. And so they had kind of a coming together. Well, after that, like 30 verses after that, you've got a guy named Paul. We know Paul, right? Paul like did all those missionary journeys. He started a bunch of churches. And then you have Barnabas over here, who's like an encourager. He's like a friend and confidant and a co-worker. And these two have been working to build the church. And so they're talking about taking a trip. And here's the conversation they have. Acts chapter 15, we're going to read 36 through 38 real quick. To start, it says, after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brothers in every city. I'm going to read from the screen because my version is different. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back to visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. Let me just pause there for just a second. They planted churches in all these different cities. If you have a Bible, you could probably look to the back. In a lot of Bibles, there's one of these maps talks about the missionary journeys that Paul went on. And when he was on those missionary journeys, he was planting churches. He was like sharing the gospel, and he was like, all right, y'all got to get this thing up and running. So he stayed with them for a little bit, helped them plant, and then he moved to the next town and helped them plant another church. And so what he's talking about is like, we need to go and like check on these churches. It was very different back then. So we don't have this kind of situation now. We have all of our churches that are kind of up and running because we've been doing this for a little while. There's no one coming to check on us. We've got Houston's First, and then we've got all these wonderful churches in Sienna that we have good, friendships and relationships with, but we're all kind of doing our own thing, right? Now, Paul and Barnabas don't agree about how they should do this. Let's go to the next slide real quick. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. But Paul didn't think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. Basically, John had bailed on the mission trip the first time. And so what happens? They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. I think there's one more slide of verses, if I'm correct. So Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Two guys in charge of starting all these churches had a disagreement and parted ways. How do you think that worked? Do you think people like gossiped? They're like, oh, what do you think happened? Do you think they're ever going to talk again? Do you think? I bet they did. I bet they did. I bet that's what happened. Maybe you're in the room right now and you've had a friendship kind of end, and it maybe had kind of a public ending, and people have asked you questions. Hey, I don't see you hanging out with that person anymore. Like, what's going on? Or maybe your family even asks you, like, hey, I noticed you don't go over to their house anymore. I noticed that you guys don't go see movies anymore. And some of these things, they part. And so you have to know what to do after. There's two things that I want to say about what we should do in those moments. And I really want you to listen to these, because the average teenager, listen to me, the average teenager doesn't have this moment to have this conversation. And so the average teenager blows some things up, not knowing the consequences are worse than before. Okay? 2 things that I want you to do. The first thing is I want you to choose what you think about that other person. I want you to choose what you think about that other person. Now, what does that mean? Why does it matter what you think? Like, what if I hate that person inside of my heart, but I would never gossip about them. I'd never talk trash about them. What do you think Jesus would say about that? Anybody know what Jesus said about our heart versus our actions? Jesus essentially, almost right out of the gate, his first sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, is he keeps saying, you've heard it said. In other words, the Old Testament says this: if you kill somebody, that's a sin. And you're like, easy. I have never killed anybody. I'm good. He said, but I say that if you call someone fool, that you're guilty of murder in your heart. You're like, whoa. I've done that a lot of times. I have murdered a lot of people in my head, apparently. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery with another woman. But I say, if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, guys, you've already committed adultery in your heart. What is Jesus saying in those moments? First of all, we are all hopeless. We are all hopeless. And there's good news, right? Because Jesus is I've come to bring life. I've come to bring life more abundantly. I'm giving you salvation. I want you to have peace in a relationship with me, and I want to rescue you out of your sin. But just understand, you can't do this life on your own. So let's take it all the way back to friendship. What does Jesus say about what's going on inside of your heart? You can feel whatever you want in your heart, but as long as you don't say anything ugly about those people, you're good? I don't think he would say that. What would he say? You've heard it said, don't call anyone names. You've heard it said, don't gossip about people. You've heard it said, don't lie or betray people. That's maybe how he would start it. What do you think? How do you think he would finish it? But I say, it's what you think about them in your heart that matters. Right? If calling someone a fool or having judgment for someone unrighteously in our head is like murdering them, then you can't just clean up your words. Now, please have a filter. Just hear me. Please have a filter on your words. We should all have a filter. We should all kind of maybe take some words that are in our head and just kind of grab them before they come out. But you know what that is? The scriptures talk about our heart as the wellspring of life. And the scripture also talks about our tongue as the thing that kind of unleashes what's already in our heart. Our words kind of tell on us sometimes. So you can do as much as you can to hide the fact that you really, really hate someone, but eventually it's going to come out. And at the end of the day, it's not about hiding it anyway. Let me just tell you, I don't want to live a life where I'm leading this double life where I have to just make sure no one ever knows that I don't hate that person. You know why? Because that means I have to lie every day. That means I have to. So what's the difference maker? The difference maker is maybe do as much as you can to forgive them and move on with your life in peace. Do you know what I want in my life? I want more peace. I don't want more make sure nobody hears me talking bad about that person. Make sure nobody knows that I really hate that person in my heart. What I want is peace. I don't want to live a double life. So when you choose what to think about that other person, what do you think follows? Let's do this. Don't raise your hand. If you are harboring hatred or bitterness for somebody, don't raise your hand. Don't point fingers. What would it take for you to give that over at the foot of the cross and just say, you know what, God, I just release it. I just release it. And I choose not to have bitterness or hatred for that person anymore. Hear me. I know that's not easy. I know that for some of you, you think it's impossible. What I would tell you is I think what we think is impossible, Jesus calls possible. He can do the supernatural with just our very little bit of just offering. Kind of like the feeding of the 5,000, right? Five fish, 2 loaves, or 5 loaves, 2 fish, whatever it was, fed like 20,000 people. That's impossible. And that's just like a meal. We're talking about like your heart. If you are a Christian in this room, let me tell you, like you have no business harboring bitterness and anger and hatred in your heart for someone else. Even if that person hurt you so bad. You were friends and now you're not. Even if. So we choose what to think about the other person. What is the second thing? I want you to choose what to do. I want you to choose what to do. Now, this is easier. Do we have that on the screen? Thank you. If you choose what to think about that other person, choosing what to do is it's like a landslide. Like it's just easy. Like it's downhill from there. Why? Because you win that battle in your mind first. You win that battle in your heart first. You give that over the Lord. You may have to do it more than once. You may have to go to the altar. You may have to go to God in prayer more than once to say, God, I'm going to ask you to give me the power. Do you guys understand? All eyes on me for just a second. Do you guys understand that you cannot do this in your own power? Some of us are so like, Christianity's stupid. Like I ask Jesus for help and then I don't feel like I keep sinning and like he's supposed to fix that. And here's the deal. Like you can't stop that sin in your own power. And for you to think that you could, it's like no wonder we're confused about stuff. But you win that battle in your heart. You give them over to God in your heart first. And choosing what to do. Now, let me just be real practical so everyone hears me, and this is the last thing I'll say. What are some things that you think are helpful to not do to someone that maybe you used to be friends with and now you're not? What are some things you're tempted to do that might not be the right move? Gossip. What's a gossip? Let's just be real clear. It's talking behind people's back. Some people say gossip is like lying about someone. It may be the truth and you just have no business sharing it, right? You know something about somebody and you share it with someone that's none of their business. And it's usually for your own benefit to be you got the juice, right? You got that. It's like, hey, listen up. So yeah, gossip. What else? Picking on them. Yeah. You let that stuff go. EJ. Stealing money from their wallet is very specific. Oh no, it has happened before for sure. Oh, okay, all right. Confession time for EJ. All right, let's go, Angel. Shh. Say that again. Ooh. Hey, middle schoolers, those are high school problems. Some of you in middle school is like, I know what that's like. No, you don't. It gets a little deeper. So let's dig into that for just a second. Manipulating that person or manipulating other people, like about them.
Usually, it can go both ways. Usually, in the experience I've had, they try to manipulate one person. But then some people take it a step further and they feel they manipulate people around them.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Yeah. And their own personal gain is usually like weak sauce. It's like, what's the point? Ainsley. Revenge. Revenge is something that like, it's in all of us. It's in me. I didn't say that. Am I all alone in that? Like sometimes you want to get revenge on the people that hurt you? Am I all alone? Okay, I'm not alone. Cool. Yeah. Chris?
No, I was saying revenge. That's it.
Revenge, yeah. Keegan? Talking crap about people? Yeah. Yeah. All those things. Now, here's the thing. Listen to me and we'll be done. I want to challenge you. What does it look like to choose what you think about the other person? I want you to think about that because so many people will leave here and not apply that at all. That's fine. Just don't call yourself a Christian. Gulp. What does God say about the way we treat each other? You'll know them by the love they have for each other. You'll know them by the way they gossip about each other. You'll know them about the way they get revenge on each other. If we trust God with the salvation of our very souls for like eternity, what's stopping you from trusting him with giving something over? The thing that I've learned the most is that when you, for some reason, sometimes we like to hold on to that anger and that bitterness. I want all eyes on me because I think this might save you some grief. For some reason, we like to hold on to that anger. And I don't know why. It's like a power move, right? It's like, yeah, you know what you did to me. I'm going to treat you like this forever. You hold on to that. It's like you are taking your own poison. Like you're wishing the poison on them, but you are the one living with that in your heart. So I want to challenge you. What does it look like to choose what you think about the other person? Friendships are going to end. And that might hurt. They might end because you're in a different schedule in a different school. They might end because, man, there was an event and I can never be friends. I can never trust that person ever again. Choose what you think about that other person and then choose what you do. And then you'll literally share the gospel with the world about the fact that your heart's given over to Jesus, or you'll just look like another hypocrite. And so you get to choose which way you go with that. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Lord, we just put ourselves in your hands with this. We put ourselves in your hands. We can't do this on our own. And so, Lord, we just, we trust you. Lord, I pray that we would challenge ourselves with what it looks like to figure out how to give those moments of, those feelings of bitterness and anger over to you. I pray that one student tonight would challenge themselves to do that. What's in your name we pray. Amen.